You are supposed to listen. Listen.
So what do women on TikTok have to teach us about parenting? Well, today we have selected the top parenting advice videos that are ranking on TikTok. And this time we're listening to the women. We already responded to what men on TikTok have to say, the most famous TikTok men. And now we're talking about the clips that have gotten the most views from women. All right, let's dive right in.
No matter how old your kid is, this is something every parent needs to know. I'm Dr. Becky. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in parenting, and I want to get this information out there. Your child is looking for your support, not your solutions. This is true at every age. Let's say you have a toddler and they can't figure out a puzzle and they're frustrated. They're looking for you to say, "Oh, this is a hard puzzle," not, "I'll do that piece for you." When your older kid is struggling to learn how to read, they're looking for you to say, "Learning how to read is so tricky. You know, it was tricky for me too." Not, "I'll read that page to you." When your middle school age kid is struggling with a friend, they're looking for you to say, "Oh, I get why you're upset." Not, "Why don't you just send them a text and say what you want to say?" Our kids, like us, are looking for our support, not our solutions, because when they have our support, guess what? They're really good at coming up with solutions on their own.
Okay, so I think Dr. Becky has a lot of really great advice, and I think this is good advice. Stepping away from constantly teaching and offering solutions and being very hands-on with our children, I think is a great idea. I disagree that they're not also looking for our solutions sometimes. I think it's a role of a parent, a friend, wife, a daughter, etc. to offer. Sometimes, right? Sometimes we need to offer actual practical hands-on solutions to things or teach them skills. So yes, we need to offer them support when they're struggling with something, but I don't think that that means that we can't ever suggest things, teach them things, tell them what we expect them to do in a certain situation, offer them help solving some problem that they're facing. Like in the example when she said her middle schooler is struggling with a friend, with some kind of social issue. I actually happen to think that saying, "Why don't you text your friend?" could be a really appropriate response to that situation, right? Like, yes, you could just offer empathy and support, but I always just think empathy and support is the first stage of any process with a child who's having a hard time. Just like empathy and support is the first stage with your friend who's having a hard time. They might then also need help structuring an idea, a plan, taking action, moving towards the next step, deciding what they're going to do next. And I think one of the problems that I have with the gentle parenting kind of sphere is that it often just gets stuck at the stage of empathy, as if that solves all problems, as if that teaches all skills, as if that just magically grows a child up into the type of resilient, capable, competent adult we want them to be. And that's what she's suggesting here, is that if you offer them unconditional support and empathy, like, "Oh, that's so hard. I get it. Oh, I also struggled with reading," then suddenly they're just going to know how to solve their problems. And I don't find that to be true. My daughter is a perfect example. I taught her to read. And if I'd have just said, "I also struggled with reading all the time," she would never have learned to read. I also said, "Come, we're going to do the next step. Come, please read this page. Let me show you how to sound it out. Let's expand your vocabulary. Let's expand your phonetic skills." And so I just think this type of advice sounds really great, and it has a kernel of truth. Of course it does, but it never really gets to the practical, honest, pragmatic, effective side of parenting, which is also teaching them skills, solutions, mindsets, coaching them through follow through, resilience, taking action, doing the hard thing even when you don't want to. And just the pure fact that empathy, no, it's not always enough. Let's keep going.
Your child owes you nothing. Parents don't like when I say that.
Your child owes you nothing?
No human being owes you anything. When we say someone else owes us something, that is being said with authority, entitlement, ownership, possession. And we own or possess nobody, least of all our children. We only, if at all, barely own our own self right here, right now, in this little moment. So this sounds disempowering, I know, but it's actually hugely liberating. When you realize, who the hell am I trying to control? When I get that deeply, life becomes beautiful.
I have a lot of time and a lot of love for Dr. Shafali. She's an actual friend, and I think that she has an interesting point here in the idea that we don't ever truly possess maybe anything in this world, maybe not even ourselves, right? And certainly not other people. So yeah, we don't own our child, and they don't owe us anything in, some kind of, I don't know, restrictive and controlling type of way. But I have to say that although, set to the music and seeing Mel Robbins, response like, wow, our child doesn't owe us anything, it makes it sound like it's some kind of spiritual revelation. But to me, it just rings wrong. I think that we as children do owe our parents something. I think as societies, we owe each other something. I think as husbands and wives, we owe something to each other. I think that is the meaning of being in a contract, being in a relationship, being in a covenant, being in a marriage, being in a family. I think we do owe our family something. I can say for myself as a daughter, I feel that I owe my parents a great deal. I feel as a sister that I owe my siblings a great deal. As a wife, I owe my husband a great deal. As a parent, I owe my children a great deal. I take her point that we don't get to control our children, that they are not ours, that they're not, some puppets that we get to master, that we don't get to, live vicariously through them or project onto them all sorts of things that are our own baggage or our own issues, or force them into our way of life and our belief system. But I think that it's messages like these that I think sound quite new age and spiritual and enlightened and liberating, as she says at the end, that actually lead to a very odd sort of society indeed, and very lost children indeed. Children who are entitled, who are narcissistic, who are extremely self-obsessed, who don't owe their parents anything, because that's exactly what their parents taught them, right? You don't owe me anything. You don't owe me respect. You don't owe me relationship. You don't owe me gratitude. I think that our children do owe us something, and that we owe them something, absolutely. So again, I think it sounds really, great, and this liberating idea. And of course, there is a kernel of truth to it. Like I said, we don't possess them. They're not our belongings. But I think the whole meaning of a relationship is that we belong to each other, is that we do owe each other something. Just like a husband and wife owe each other maybe honesty, fidelity, companionship, camaraderie, working towards the same goals. We owe each other the commitment that we made to each other, that type of thing. And yeah, children are born into the world. They don't necessarily choose to be born, and we bring them into the world. And I think, a lot of people in the comments here are saying, oh, well, they don't owe me anything, but I owe them everything because I brought them into the world. And again, I think these are a little bit superficial and, shallow interpretations of what relationships really are. Relationships are about deep intertwinement and connection, and not enmeshment, not projection, not using each other and abusing each other, not holding on and clinging on and not letting them grow and fly the coop, etc. But I think the whole idea of relationships is that we build something that is interconnected, that is about interdependency, that I depend on my children and my children depend on me, that we build that kind of lifelong commitment. And I also think it's very good for children to know that they do owe us something, that they owe us to be contributors, to be respectful. They owe us respect. I guess maybe because I come from a more traditional background, maybe because I come from an ancient, culture, but I still believe in respecting elders. I still believe that it has a great deal of merit and meaning and is worthwhile to teach our children that for their own good, right? That they owe their surroundings gratitude, that they owe their surroundings respect, that they owe their surroundings moral behavior, pro-social behavior, generosity, charity, truth, all sorts of things that our children do owe us. And so this idea that you don't expect anything from your child, they don't owe you anything, I think is actually doing them a great disservice. I think it's not in their best interest to grow up thinking and feeling that. It's good in the sense that it maybe detaches you a little bit from being overly controlling, right? And I think that's kind of where Dr. Shefali comes at this idea, is that she wants us to be more conscious and more boundaried and more aware of the demands that we're placing on our children. And sure, we should be all of those things. But the idea that children don't owe us anything is, I think, to their great detriment, because it raises them in a very entitled way, right? Not thinking about what they owe others, not thinking about what they are here to give, right? Rather than to take. Not thinking about their continuity, their connection, their linkage to their history, to their family tree. to what generations and generations of people have sacrificed and given in order for them to have the life that they have. You know, I owe a great deal to a great many thousands of people throughout history who fought for the rights that I have, for the freedoms that I have, for so much of what I have. And so to grow up thinking that we don't owe our parents anything, I think that's really, really harmful and unhelpful, actually, to be honest. All right, let's keep going.
If your adult child comes to you and asks you to take some accountability over the behaviors that you have displayed during their childhood, you are supposed to listen. Listen. No, they're not supposed to understand you, because you as a parent have a responsibility, and I said responsibility, to provide relief to your child because you chose to have them, not the other way around. Let me be very clear. Your kid doesn't care what was your thought process back in the day when you manifested yourself in such a way that traumatized them. They don't care why you thought it was a good idea. They don't care that you want to be understood or that you need forgiveness. They need closure. Okay? I don't want to hear it anymore. Well, I just want my child to understand me. Why would they? I don't understand. Are they your parent? Because Okay, sorry, this was just a rant, so I'm now gonna let you scroll by.
Whoa, okay. So she said it there at the end, this was just a rant. And I think that's a good categorization of what we just watched. I have so much to say about this video, and it kind of links exactly to the previous video about the idea that your children don't owe you anything. And now it's not only that your children don't owe you anything, but when they come to you and they have complaints and they have demands and they have issues with how you raise them and they have accusations that you have traumatized them, then all you need to do is just listen and support them and accept everything and every interpretation they have to say, because they deserve closure. They didn't ask to be brought into the world, and you are the problem. You know, your human needs and complexities and baggage and history are completely irrelevant here. The only thing that's relevant is what the child wants from you. And I do want to underscore that she's talking about an adult child. So an adult who also has, by the way, responsibility and accountability for their behaviors, coming to their adult parents years later, right? 20, 30 years after they raised them, and coming back with complaints and coming back with issues should just be listened to and validated. And that's all, because you're a parent. So again, I'm going to have to disagree with this one. And it's interesting because there's something about the female vibe, the women's vibe on these parenting advice that is always leaning hard into very extreme empathy, almost toxic empathy towards children, leaning hard into the idea that there should be no expectations or boundaries or demands on the children, but just support, right? And now it's even going as far as to say that even when the children are adults and they are coming to you with whatever they're coming to you with, it's not a place to explain yourself. It's not a place to open a conversation. You just need to validate and listen and empathize. So no, I don't think that's true. I think that we as adult children need to exercise some respect and empathy and understanding for what our parents, went through. The belief that they did the best they could with what they had at the time, with a lot less information than we have, for better or worse, with their own baggage and childhood traumas as well, with their own challenges. And, if you want to seek closure from your parents, then Godspeed, God bless. I hope that works out well. Some parents are equipped to listen and to be supportive, and some are not. And we've got to be realistic about that. And I think a better advice from this humble therapist rant would be actually to bolster our sense of self, our capacity to heal and move on, our ability to disconnect and detach from our childhood and from our pain and grow up, mature, move past, forgive. There's just no element of grace or forgiveness or self-accountability and responsibility for the fact that now we're adults and we can't continue to blame all of our issues on our childhood forever and ever till the end of eternity. At some point, we have to release our parents and say they did the best job that they could do. Yes, they were hurtful in XYZ ways, but now we're grown-ups and now we've got to make our own decisions and try and move on. And if they can listen and validate that, awesome. And if they can't, that's to be expected. Like, most people are not just these, amazing natural listeners. And if they had been so empathic and so connected naturally, then they'd have been that way in our childhood. And the fact was that in this case, they weren't. And so it's important, I think, to note that advice like this comes from a very angry and inflammatory place. She says it. She says she's ranting, and she is. She's swearing. She's mad. She's almost escalating the situation that you have with your parents rather than teaching what I think might be a lot more helpful, which is to release our childhood at some point, to at some point say, okay, now I'm a grown up. You know, they taught me what they taught me. They gave me what they gave me. They hurt me in the ways that they hurt me. I want to connect with them and respect them because they're my parents today. And if we can reach some kind of understanding about my childhood, great. I've seen that happen many times with adult parents, and it can be very healing and very helpful. And it can also be a complete waste of time or even make things worse, depending on the individuals involved. But I think what would be a much better and more therapeutic, approach for this person to take and to advise her audience with is that not all parents are able to hear it, and you don't need them. You don't need them for closure. You don't need your parents to apologize or to explain. You can actually go through that process on your own by strengthening your own mindset, by becoming unvictimized, unoffendable, unshakable. These are things I teach in my courses because I think that this idea of kind of egging you on and winding you up to get more and more upset with your parents. And when you couple that with the ideas that we just heard about, you don't owe your parents anything, I think these are not helpful ideas. I think we do owe our parents respect and gratitude. I'm not talking about abusive parents. I'm talking about parents who did the best they could. And maybe, there were some low points or some mistakes that they made along the way. And I would just also caution to remind us all as parents that we're going to make mistakes too. And maybe you want to think about how you talk about and treat your parents as an adult as a good model for how your children will talk about and treat you when they're adults, because you're modeling that behavior too. I know that my adult children will probably have plenty of complaints, plenty of things that I did wrong, plenty of things that they disagree with. And I really hope that they show me grace and understanding and realize that I was doing the best I could with what I had and that I apologize. And I hope I do follow this lady's advice and I am, a good listener and I validate and hear their concerns. But I also hope that my children show up with respect, with gratitude, with a certain fairness and understanding that no one's perfect, no human is perfect, no parent is perfect, and that they can handle it, that they have a strong mindset, that we all make mistakes, that we don't need to escalate and blow out of proportion this type of thing. So yeah, okay, let's keep watching.
Here's the best advice I got for learning how to self-regulate. My kids' meltdowns and temper tantrums and emotional outbursts are super triggering for me, like fight, flight, fawn, freeze, everything's activated. And I would find myself like seething, like getting so upset that they are just like screaming and crying and being completely irrational, which is developmentally normal for them. But then I found myself yelling at them. I was like, I am tired of yelling all the time because I'm emotionally dysregulated. So actually this is two things. One, it's not your job to make it stop. If your kid is having a emotional breakdown or a huge temper tantrum, it's not your job to stop it.
Let's pause right there. I don't know. I think this is partially true that it's not your job to stop it in the sense that kids are allowed to sometimes cry and have meltdowns. And often it's just not really possible to stop it. It's a bit like, going to the bathroom. They just need to let it all out. But I would also just say that if they're having a huge temper tantrum, say in the cereal aisle or in the middle of a birthday party or at dinner time, then it is your job to put that in its correct place. It is my job to make sure that my child doesn't destroy someone else's property, doesn't ruin someone else's moment, doesn't derail the entire family, because they're acting out. And so I don't think that this is such great advice to say it's just never your job to stop it. I think it's not your job to necessarily bottle up or suppress or stop the emotions, but you do need to stop the destructive behaviors.
This is where the hard part comes in because we feel like we need to stop it because it's making us uncomfortable, or we're out in public and we're afraid of what other people are going to think of our child who's thrown themselves on the floor because they can't get a toy.
Okay, Yes, other people will judge your child if they throw themselves on the ground because they can't get a toy. If your child is, say, over, 4 years old, that is not pro-social behavior or generally going to be accepted by society. Other people won't want your child to come and play in their house with their kids if they scream and throw things and disrupt a school event or a party or the playground. So it actually does matter that we raise children that garner affection and fondness from other people, because they won't be invited into society if they can't regulate themselves, if they can't control their emotions. By the time a child is 4, they shouldn't be acting out this way in public unless there are developmental reasons for them to do so. It's not just developmentally normal for, a 6-year-old to be kicking and screaming in a toy store. I mean, are there cases, the kid is overexhausted, the kid is very hungry, we've wound them up, whatever. Does it happen? Of course, it does happen. But then I think it is our job to stop it, to be a proxy for society and to show them this type of behavior is not going to be tolerated or accepted here. You're allowed to feel disappointed or upset because you didn't get the toy, but you're not allowed to be kicking and screaming down the aisle, right? And I'm talking about typically developing kids. This is the type of thing that we do actually want to stop.
Don't react. Just sit with it. How does it make you feel? What does it feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? What do you feel like you need to do right now under these circumstances? Now that your kid is done, they're fine, they're dandy, they've moved on to the next thing, go back and keep a journal of how you felt. What did it feel like going through that temper tantrum with your child without trying to intervene? Where did you feel it in your body? What did you feel like you needed to do? Why did you feel like you needed to do it? You have to get comfortable with the discomfort. One of the best takeaways I've ever had from therapy, which in general for everything. I learned that a lot of us parents, probably millennials, Gen Xers, are so triggered by our kids having these emotional meltdowns, outbursts, temper tantrums was because we were never allowed to have those. We may have been sent to our rooms. We may have been quieted. We may have gotten we're not going to do this in the store kind of stuff from our parents, instead of actually being taught what to do with those big feelings and emotions. So now we don't know what to do with those big feelings and emotions when our kids start to show them. And how could we possibly regulate a dysregulated child when we are a dysregulated adult who doesn't know how to regulate their own emotions? So get comfortable in the discomfort and know that it's not your job to make it stop.
There is a huge difference between a child having an emotional meltdown where they need to release their big feelings, they need to have a good cry, everything just needs to flush out of the system, and a child having a temper tantrum, say, in a public place, in a store, in a park, in a playground, etc. There is a reason that our parents did not let us do that type of thing in public, and that is because they were disciplining us and holding us to a standard of society that would be acceptable, that we wouldn't be perceived as out of control brats who are disruptive to, the public peace and who are entitled and who are completely dysregulated. And that was a service to us. That was not oppressing our feelings. That was not making us, emotionally stymied, as this TikToker is suggesting, but rather actually teaching us that there is a time and a place. Just like we were potty trained. Potty training is not a way of oppressing our children's freedom to poop wherever they want. It's a way of teaching them that there is a time and a place. And I think this gets really lost in the gentle parenting discourse. She's saying, whatever your child does, you just need to not react and just sit with those feelings and journal about how it makes you feel and reflect on your own childhood. Because obviously it's because of how your parents parented you that you don't like your child screaming in the cereal aisle. Otherwise, you would be totally fine with it. So she's right that you want to take a pause before you react so that you can calm yourself for a moment and not react in a triggered fight or flight manner. And that's cool. But I think she's wrong that you just always need to sit with your child's feelings no matter what they do and not respond. Because again, there is a time and a place. And I think if your child can't keep it together in the supermarket, then they need to be removed from the supermarket. If they can't keep it together at the dinner table, they do need to be taken to their room. They do need to be taken away from other people so that they can, in private, release their emotions, calm themselves down, get back to socialized behavior, civilized behavior, and then they can rejoin the rest of humans, right? And so I think that, again, it's okay to kind of coach yourself through it, parent yourself through it, think about it. But I think this is going way too far to the idea that you should never intervene and you should just start journaling and learning how to regulate yourself. No, it's appropriate for a parent to teach a child that screaming is not the way to get what they want, that kicking things or throwing things is unacceptable, that they won't be allowed to disrupt a social setting. I think that we need more of that, not less.
Look at your child and ask them, Is there anything that you want me to apologize for? Is there anything I didn't understand or that you wish I would have done differently? And the really important point here is when they start to open up and share with you, don't get defensive. Don't justify your actions. Receive their words. Allow them to know that you are a safe place, that they can trust you, and you're willing to make repair.
Okay, so I think this is good advice to generally open up a channel with our child to be able to offer us, feedback, criticism, things that they feel hard done by. The trouble that I have with this advice is just where it is in the context, in the bigger picture of our, cultural moment in parenting. In other words, I actually do ask my children, hey, is there anything you wish I did differently as a mom? Is there anything that I've hurt you and I haven't apologized about? That type of thing. And I think that is the type of relationship I want with my children, of trust and of, that safety to really share something that is, maybe not so flattering or harder to hear or more painful. So I agree. But the trouble that I have with this is just that I'm noticing that all of the parenting advice from the women that we've watched today is primarily focused on this safe space type of idea, on being empathic, on being just holding space, right? It was about not offering advice, not offering solutions, not feeling like your children owe you anything, asking them if you've done anything wrong, just never interfering with a tantrum, holding back, just, working through your own emotions internally, but not ever expecting your child to, pull it together. And that's the moment that we're in, is that the advice is constantly leaning towards this ultra soft, ultra self-criticism, right? It's always the parent's fault. The parent always needs to look internally. The parent always needs to just learn to self-regulate themselves. The parent can't expect anything of the child. The parent doesn't own the child. The child doesn't owe the parent anything. The parent shouldn't set any standards, shouldn't offer any solutions, shouldn't coach, shouldn't expect. And, it's just this and I'm noticing it's primarily coming from all the women videos. The male videos had a very different bent. And this is just, by the way, we randomly selected the top viewed videos on TikTok for parenting advice, some for men, some for women. And that was what came up. So this is clearly indicative of the culture of what's most popular, of what's, being most viewed, of the messages that are being most shared. And I think, again, I can agree with the kernels of truth in all of these messages. And I feel them myself. I also want that soft, feminine, receptive, connected, loving, safe, trustworthy, supportive, empathic, validating relationship with my kids. I do. I want all of those things, and I work pretty hard on all of them. What's missing for me is all of the other side, right? And it's a side we actually, I guess unsurprisingly heard in the advice from men, which is about not being their friend, but being their parent, having authority, having expectations. Not all the men made those points. A lot of the men also went in this empathic direction of, just be trustworthy, just share the truth, just let them share the truth and don't get angry with them. Be your child's confidant. Don't be too restrictive or too strict, because then they won't come to you. Build a peaceful home for them. All of these things are great. I just think that they are coming in a kind of vacuum of all of the other side of parenting, which is about expectations, which is about having rules, having a certain guidance and coaching and values that you want to offer to your children, right? Showing them that there is a right and wrong way, right? That when they've done something wrong, there are consequences to bad choices. That we, as their parents, yes, we love, validate, empathize, etc., and we're going to call them to action to, whatever it is, to excel, to achieve, to overcome, to build resiliency, to build capacity, to build strength, to find solutions, take the next step. And I just think this wallowing in the empathy stage is not very healthy for them, not very healthy for us. I think it creates a very kind of enmeshed, codependent, a rather toxic, and maybe even like a bit of an addictive environment where I just get this soft, soft, soft touch, and then I can't handle any kind of expectation. I can't call myself to higher action because I've only ever received this softness. And I also think that parents are really seem to be giving up on their status of authority, on their leadership, on their expectations of respect, right? And I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable only asking my children what I need to apologize for, what I've done wrong, only making this safe space for them where I'm just taking on all the responsibility and accountability for anything that's ever gone wrong. I'm happy to apologize. I do so frequently. I definitely hold myself accountable for mistakes I made, but I don't think that should be to the exclusion of also expecting my children not to be rude to me, expecting them to be helpful around the home, expecting them to apologize when they've made a mistake, expecting them to also know how to take accountability and responsibility. Like, I don't see any of that in the parenting advice out there. And so it just seems very one-sided to me. I guess that's the bottom line here, is that it's all fine and dandy, but where's all the other stuff that's also really important that children also really need? I mean, we know this from research really empirically that children need high expectations and high support, but we're only ever hearing about this high support. So yeah, I guess that's my response. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe to this video, and I will see you back here next time. Keep on living that high fam life.